Hello, everyone. I'm Bob Dempsey at the UW Neurosurgery Department. We're doing one of our series of updates on the COVID-19 pandemic. Since it's 22 and it's still called 19, you can understand that we're into our third year of this pandemic, and we're beginning to wonder what's our next steps. And I want to show you a slide here. This is a slide I used last year, and it is the end game. So this is a chess term. How do you finish a match? And our end game with this pandemic was stymied last year. So we're again at a position where we're hoping we're getting past this. And what I'm going to say is this is a time that I'm very optimistic, but please be realistic. We're going to talk about the role of vaccinations. We're going to talk about masks and their ongoing role. We're going to talk about the local and national rules about such things, about travel and where we are. So first, let's get some perspective on this pandemic. It's been going on now for into its third year. There are 6 million deaths worldwide. You begin to think about that, you understand why this closed the world's economy. There'll be 1 million deaths in the United States probably today. Less so in Wisconsin and Dane County proportionally. But remember, we're now beginning, as I said 2 years ago, to understand that COVID death numbers confirmed is a drop in the bucket compared to the real numbers, because we often throughout the world, in the developing world, low and middle income countries, don't record all the deaths. So when the epidemiologists look at the increase in unexpected deaths, they think that this pandemic killed between 14 and 24 million people. That is enormous. So it tells you what it was. But let's look locally and get an idea why in the midst of that we're getting optimistic. The trends here in Wisconsin, markedly better. The deaths are going down. The Dane County deaths are going down, but we've been through a lot. 12,000 Wisconsinites killed by something. That's an auto accident range and more. The numbers here are very compelling. We've seen this tremendously steep drop over the last really 2 months. And we're very thrilled and we're opening up and people think it's over. But remember, even right now, when we feel more confident, we're not as good as we were last July, where our numbers really were so good that we thought we were into the end game. And what happened was, at that time, we had a fairly virulent variant, and we had a lot of uninoculated people throughout the world, or unexposed people, and the Delta variant took off, and it really hospitalized a lot of people, and then a lot of people, and then Omicron. Deaths resulted, cases resulted, but Omicron was the game changer, the thing that we talked about. How do pandemics end? When a variation came in, a mutant that was very easy to catch but not very deadly, suddenly a lot of the world got sick, some without even knowing they were sick. And that began to isolate the pandemic even better than we did by living on an island or being completely isolated. And that's important because what's happened has shown that. As the numbers have fallen, still not as good as we were last July, but they fall at a rapid rate as if it's running out of places to go. And if you look at some places where we didn't think they had much COVID because we didn't look, like South Africa with its large rural populations, a simple test of antibodies there showed that 80% of people have been exposed, even though in many parts of the world like that, only 4% have been vaccinated. So this virus, by infecting so many people, is running out of room. And that's why I'm hopeful. It's very important to know, though, that these pandemics, the major ones, the Russian pandemic of the 1900s, the US one of the 1800s, and the US one of the 1900s, were 4-year events. It's just that the last 2 years were discovered only by the scientists because the average public didn't realize it. It was a respiratory virus like other respiratory viruses existing, which is important when we think about the roles of masks, the roles of vaccinations. Right now in the US, what's our end game? Well, our end game has to do with who else is still being infected. There are very few places in the continental US that are in danger. They're northern Maine, eastern Kentucky, and rural Montana. These were all areas that thought that they had no exposure, but now it's caught up with them. The other place, intriguingly enough, in the world are islands that thought they were isolated, Hong Kong and New Zealand. It's now sweeping through. New Zealand is so vaccinated that they're just showing cases without getting very sick. Hong Kong have enough unvaccinated, they're very sick. So that's the first thing to understand is protection by antibodies is the key for you personally, for your children, and the world. And if you can be vaccinated, I know that very young children are not yet because the vaccination for the very young children has not been proven safe yet. But if you can, you are literally 60 times better to avoid COVID and avoid being sick from COVID, I should say, or dying. That's huge. In other words, this is a disease of illness in the unvaccinated for the most part, unless they're immunocompromised. So the results for us here in Dane County, which is relatively heavily vaccinated, we have 17 cases in the hospital, and only a quarter of them really are in because they're sick from COVID. The other 2/3 are in for their appendectomy, and we found out they're COVID, and we have to isolate them. We take care of their appendectomy or their head injury or something like that. So what's happening? There is reason for optimism, and there's a lot of public pressure to open up the society, and we must open up society. What about masks? Well, that's really the next important question, because you may notice that we're still wearing masks. It's going to change. Dane County last week dropped the mandate. That means you're no longer required in Dane County. That doesn't mean it isn't smart to wear a mask. The University of Wisconsin and the non-patient areas of the med school will drop their mask next week, the mask mandate. It's still smart. If you're anywhere near a patient, you must mask. Right now, public transportation, you must mask. It's hard to say how long that'll be continued because, quite frankly, that is more political than scientific often. But what about yourself personally? Well, this is a big shift. You used to wear a mask to protect yourself and your fellow mankind. But now you're wearing a mask to protect yourself. And I feel if you're masked and triple vaccinated, you're likely to be pretty darn safe in our society, even if the people you meet aren't masked. You'll still keep your spacing, you'll still be careful. And, I double mask on airplanes and basketball games and things like that that are pretty sketchy. I go to church, but try to separate and still mask. And I think we have to be sensible. Even that will become less important, but I'm very aware that our numbers aren't as good as they were last July when we were all still masking. The difference is that the variant was much more dangerous and deadly back then. So we are entering into a new phase. We're going to open up. All the things we predicted are going to happen. 2/3 of our meetings are going to probably be virtual. I believe for a long, long time, maybe forever, because there are advantages. But we'll be doing more in person. Still protect yourself. I recommend it at this point. But do engage in life. And do understand that other people may be less cautious. So protect yourself, your family. So use the masks indoors. Use it on public transportation. Common sense is the key. And yeah, we are in a much better place. We're in a much better place because of what everybody did to take care of each other during the pandemic. And I'm proud of you all for that. And yes, this has been terrible. And yes, people have lost family members. And yes, whole areas have been ravaged. But you kept a lot of people safe by your actions. Continue that. And then use common sense as things open up. And I think we'll be fine. That's what I have to say today. So I hope this is the end game. We have to be careful about it.